The colony of New Haven floated silently in the void, a lonely outpost orbiting a dim red star. It was supposed to be a place of healing, a neutral zone where humans and the alien Krill could tend to their wounded after decades of war. Lieutenant Daniel Brooks stood at the edge of the medical bay, watching as his team moved between beds, treating patients from both sides. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and metal, a constant reminder of the fragile peace they were trying to maintain. Dr. Elena Martinez adjusted her gloves before leaning over a Krill soldier lying on a gurney. His exoskeleton was cracked, and green fluid oozed from the fractures. "We need more bandages," she called out, her voice calm but firm. Nearby, two human medics worked on a soldier whose leg had been crushed during a recent skirmish. Despite the tension that still lingered between the species, everyone in the room seemed focused on one thing: saving lives. Daniel sighed and turned away. He hated this part of the job, the waiting, the uncertainty. Every day felt like walking a tightrope, balancing hope against fear. The ceasefire had been brokered months ago, but no one truly trusted it. Not the humans, not the Krill, and certainly not the mercenaries who thrived on chaos. As he walked outside the medical bay, the sound of alarms shattered the quiet. Red lights flashed across the walls, casting eerie shadows. "Incoming," someone shouted. Before Daniel could react, the ground shook violently. Explosions erupted nearby, sending shards of debris flying through the air. A group of mercenaries clad in black armor stormed into the compound, firing indiscriminately. Panic spread quickly. Medics scrambled to protect their patients, while others tried to fight back or flee. Daniel grabbed a fallen rifle and ducked behind a table as bullets whizzed past him. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Elena tending to a wounded Krill soldier despite the chaos around her. She refused to leave her post, even when the mercenaries closed in. "Elena, get down," Daniel yelled, but it was too late. One of the attackers fired, and Elena collapsed to the floor, clutching her side. Blood seeped through her fingers as she struggled to breathe. Daniel's heart sank. Without thinking, he charged forward, firing blindly at the mercenaries until they retreated. When the dust settled, bodies littered the floor, some human, some Krill, all victims of senseless violence. Kneeling beside Elena, Daniel pressed his hand against her wound to stop the bleeding. Her face was pale, but she managed a weak smile. "Don't worry about me," she whispered. "Just keep them safe." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. This wasn't supposed to happen here. This was a sanctuary, a place where weapons weren't allowed, where life mattered more than vengeance. When reinforcements finally arrived, the mercenaries were gone, leaving behind only destruction. The survivors gathered in stunned silence, staring at the wreckage of what had once been a beacon of hope. Daniel stayed by Elena's side as medics rushed her to surgery. His hands trembled as he stared at the blood staining his uniform. Who would do something like this? And why? Back on Earth, news of the attack spread like wildfire. People demanded answers, pointing fingers at both the Krill and rogue human factions. But deep down, Daniel knew this wasn't just an isolated incident. Someone wanted this fragile peace to fail, and they were willing to kill innocents to make it happen. Admiral Patrick O'Connor sat in a dimly lit conference room on Earth, his face lined with worry. Around the table, military leaders and diplomats exchanged heated words. Some argued that the attack on the medical corps was the work of rogue mercenaries acting on their own. Others suspected something more sinister, a deliberate attempt to sabotage the ceasefire. Ambassador Rachel Kim listened quietly, her arms crossed. She knew jumping to conclusions would only make things worse. Daniel Brooks arrived at Earth's capital city 2 days later. He had been summoned to testify about what happened during the attack. The journey from New Haven had given him too much time to think, and sleepless nights haunted him. Images of Elena lying on the floor, bleeding, replayed in his mind like a broken recording. When he stepped off the shuttle, a young journalist named Sarah Bennett approached him. Her sharp eyes studied him carefully as she introduced herself. "I'm covering the story," she said. "Can I ask you a few questions?" Daniel hesitated, but nodded. As they walked toward the transport station, Sarah began firing questions. "Do you think the Krill were involved? Was it really just mercenaries?" Her tone was persistent, almost urgent. Daniel found himself growing uneasy. He didn't have answers, only suspicions. At the hearing, Daniel recounted every detail of the attack, the explosions, the chaos, Alina's injury. His voice wavered when he described how the mercenaries ignored pleas for mercy. Afterward, Sarah caught up with him again. "You seem unsure about who's behind this," she said. "Why?" Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. "Because it doesn't add up," he replied. "Mercenaries don't usually hit medical units unless they're paid to. Someone wanted us to think the Krill did it, or maybe they wanted the Krill to retaliate." Sarah frowned, clearly intrigued. "And what happens if tensions boil over? Another war?" "Exactly," Daniel muttered. Before he could say more, an aide called him back inside. The meeting resumed, but Daniel couldn't shake Sarah's questions from his mind. Who stood to gain from reigniting the conflict? And why target medics? Meanwhile, Sarah dug deeper into the incident. Back at her office, she sifted through reports and old files. Something about the attack felt familiar. She remembered a case years ago involving a similar strike on a neutral zone. That attack had also been blamed on the Krill, but evidence later pointed to rogue human factions. Could history be repeating itself? Her research led her to classified documents detailing secret operations conducted during the early years of the war. One name kept appearing: Victor Kane. Once a decorated general, Kane had become infamous for his brutal tactics against the Krill. Convicted of war crimes, he had been imprisoned on a remote penal colony, but recent rumors suggested he might no longer be there. Sarah decided to visit Admiral O'Connor directly. Using her press credentials, she managed to secure a brief audience. Sitting across from him, she laid out her findings. "General Kane is missing," she said bluntly. "Isn't it possible he's behind this?" O'Connor's expression darkened. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, reluctantly, he admitted, "There are concerns about certain individuals being released. Not officially, of course, but yes, Kane is one of them." Sarah's stomach churned. Released by whom? The Admiral leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Powerful people. People who believe another war would unite humanity under one banner again. But at what cost? Sarah pressed. O'Connor didn't answer. Instead, he dismissed her, warning her not to publish anything without solid proof. As Sarah left the building, her mind raced. If Kane was free, then the attack on the medical court wasn't random. It was part of a larger plan. And if no one stopped him, countless lives would be lost. Dr. Elena Martinez adjusted her gloves before leaning over a Krill soldier lying on a gurney. His exoskeleton was cracked, and green fluid oozed from the fractures. "We need more bandages," she called out, her voice calm but firm. Nearby, 2 human medics worked on a soldier whose leg had been crushed during a recent skirmish. Despite the tension that still lingered between the species, everyone in the room seemed focused on one thing: saving lives. Daniel sighed and turned away. He hated this part of the job. The waiting, the uncertainty. Every day felt like walking a tightrope, balancing hope against fear. The ceasefire had been brokered months ago, but no one truly trusted it. Not the humans, not the Krill, and certainly not the mercenaries who thrived on chaos. As he walked outside the medical bay, the sound of alarms shattered the quiet. Red lights flashed across the walls, casting eerie shadows. "Incoming," someone shouted. Before Daniel could react, the ground shook violently. Explosions erupted nearby, sending shards of debris flying through the air. A group of mercenaries clad in black armor stormed into the compound, firing indiscriminately. Jake waited until the 2 armed men were fully focused on dismantling the equipment in the room. Their backs were turned, giving him and Sarah a narrow window of opportunity. He signaled for Sarah to stay quiet and motioned toward the door. Moving as silently as possible, Jake slipped out of the closet, keeping low to avoid being seen. Sarah followed close behind, her breath shallow and her heart pounding. The corridor outside was dimly lit, casting long shadows that helped conceal their movements. Jake led the way, his steps careful and deliberate. They needed to get back to the docking bay without drawing attention, but as they rounded a corner, they heard more voices ahead. Another group of mercenaries was patrolling the area, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Jake cursed under his breath. "We can't go that way," he whispered, pulling Sarah into an alcove. "They'll see us." Sarah's mind raced. What about the maintenance tunnels? Could we use those? Jake hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, but they're tight. And if we trip any alarms—" "We don't have a choice," Sarah interrupted, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. Without waiting for a response, she moved toward a nearby access panel and pried it open. The tunnel beyond was narrow and dark, its metal walls slick with condensation. Jake gave her a wary look before climbing in after her. The space was cramped, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees. Every sound, their breathing, the scrape of boots against metal, felt deafening. After what felt like hours, they finally reached the end of the tunnel. Jake pushed open the hatch, peeking out cautiously. The coast was clear. They emerged near the docking bay, where the Iron Mule sat waiting. But as they approached the ship, Jake froze. Two guards stood by the ramp, rifles slung over their shoulders. "Now what?" Sarah whispered, glancing around for another route. Jake thought quickly. "Distract them," he said. "I'll sneak up from behind." Sarah nodded, though her stomach churned at the idea. She grabbed a loose piece of debris and threw it against a nearby wall. The clang echoed loudly, catching the guards' attention. As they turned to investigate, Jake darted forward, moving swiftly and silently. In one fluid motion, he disarmed the first guard and knocked him unconscious. The second guard barely had time to react before Jake took him down as well. "Let's go," Jake hissed, waving Sarah toward the ship. They boarded quickly, and Jake fired up the engines. Alarms blared as the mercenaries realized what was happening, but it was too late. The Iron Mule shot out of the docking bay, leaving the station and its secrets behind. Back in the safety of space, Sarah plugged the data pad into the ship's console. She began decrypting the files they had recovered, her fingers flying over the keys. What she found chilled her to the bone. Detailed plans outlined a series of false flag operations designed to frame the Krill for attacks on human colonies. The ultimate goal: to provoke a full-scale war. "This is insane," Sarah muttered, shaking her head. "They're not just trying to start a war. They're planning to control it." Jake glanced at her, his expression grim. "And you think anyone will believe us if we try to stop them?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted, "but we have to try." As the stars streaked past outside the viewport, Sarah transmitted the files to trusted contacts back on Earth. The incriminating evidence was now out there, floating through the void like a message in a bottle. Whether it would reach the right hands or spark the very conflict it sought to prevent remained to be seen. Back on New Haven, Daniel Brooks struggled to keep his team together. The attack on the medical corps had left deep scars, not just physically but emotionally. Morale was at an all-time low, and trust between the human and Krill medics was crumbling. Every day felt like a battle against despair. One evening, as Daniel reviewed supply logs in his quarters, he noticed something strange. Corporal Emily Dawson, one of his most reliable team members, hadn't reported for duty in over 2 days. At first, he assumed she was resting after the trauma of the attack. But when he tried reaching her communicator, there was no response. Something didn't feel right. He decided to check her bunk. Her room was tidy, almost too perfect, as if she hadn't been there in a while. On her desk sat a data pad, its screen dark. Daniel picked it up and turned it on. The device required a passcode, but after a few attempts, he managed to bypass the lock. What he found made his blood run cold. Emily had been keeping detailed notes about suspicious activity within their ranks. Conversations overheard, unexplained absences, shipments of supplies that didn't match official records. It all pointed to someone leaking information to an unknown party. One name appeared repeatedly: Captain Harold Lewis, the senior officer overseeing operations at the colony. Daniel clenched his fists, anger mixing with disbelief. He trusted Lewis. The man had always seemed professional, even compassionate during tough times. Could he really be involved in something so treacherous? Determined to get answers, Daniel confronted Lewis the next morning. He waited until they were alone in the command center before speaking. "I need to talk to you," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Lewis raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "Emily Dawson," Daniel replied. "She's gone missing. And I think you know why." For a split second, Lewis looked startled, but he quickly masked it with a frown. "Missing? That's unfortunate, but I don't see how this involves me." Daniel placed the data pad on the table and showed him Emily's notes. "This involves you because her investigation led straight to you." Lewis stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but edged with tension. "You don't understand what's at stake here, Brooks. Humanity is fractured, weak. We can't afford another war unless we control it, unless it unites us under one banner." "So you're working with Victor Kane?" Daniel asked, disgust rising in his throat. "I'm not proud of it," Lewis admitted, avoiding eye contact. "But sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good." Daniel couldn't believe what he was hearing. This wasn't about peace or survival. It was about power. Before he could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. A message flashed across the main monitor: "Unauthorized vessels approaching fast." "They found us," Lewis muttered, grabbing his sidearm. "Kane's men." Daniel grabbed him by the collar, forcing him to look him in the eye. "Tell me everything. Now." Lewis hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but we need to move. If Kane's forces breach this base, none of us will make it out alive." As they ran toward the communications hub, Lewis explained how certain factions within Earth's government had orchestrated Kane's release. His mission was simple: destabilize the ceasefire and blame the Krill, giving humanity a reason to rally behind another war. Emily had uncovered the truth and paid the price for it. When they reached the comms room, Daniel activated the emergency channel and transmitted Emily's findings along with Lewis' confession. It was risky. If anyone intercepted the signal, they'd be exposed, but he couldn't let the conspiracy go unchecked. Just as the transmission finished, gunshots echoed down the corridor. Kane's mercenaries had arrived. Daniel turned to Lewis, who looked pale but resolute. "If we survive this," Daniel said, "you're going to answer for everything." Lewis nodded grimly. "Let's just hope your message gets through." Jake and Sarah's escape from the abandoned space station had been narrow, but they weren't out of danger yet. The mercenaries chasing them were relentless, their ships closing in fast. Jake pushed the Iron Mule to its limits, weaving through asteroid fields and firing bursts from the ship's outdated weapons system. "Hold on," he shouted as the ship jolted violently, narrowly avoiding a barrage of enemy fire. Sarah clung to her seat, gripping the armrests so tightly her knuckles turned white. She glanced at the navigation screen, which showed multiple red blips converging on their position. "They're gaining on us," she said, her voice trembling. "We can't outrun them forever." "We don't have to," Jake replied, his eyes locked on the controls. "Just long enough to reach Victor Kane's base." Victor Kane's asteroid hideout loomed ahead, its jagged surface bristling with defensive turrets. It wasn't exactly a safe haven, but it was their best chance to gather more evidence, and maybe even stop Kane before his plans came to fruition. Jake adjusted their trajectory, aiming for a blind spot in the asteroid's defenses. If we time this right, we can slip through without being detected. As they approached, Sarah activated the ship's cloaking device, a patchwork piece of tech Jake had salvaged during one of his smuggling runs. The device flickered but held steady, masking the Iron Mule from view. They slipped past the outer defenses and landed in a hidden alcove carved into the asteroid's rocky terrain. Inside the base, chaos reigned. Armed guards patrolled dimly lit corridors, while workers scurried about, preparing for what looked like an imminent attack. Sarah and Jake moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows. Their goal was to find Kane himself and retrieve any incriminating documents or recordings that could expose his operation to the world. After navigating through several levels of the base, they finally located Kane in the command center. He stood over a large holodeck, barking orders to his subordinates. His presence was commanding, his voice dripping with arrogance. Once the Krill retaliate, humanity will have no choice but to unite under our banner, he declared. And when that happens, we'll crush them once and for all. Sarah clenched her fists, rage bubbling inside her. This man didn't care about peace or survival. He only wanted power. Before she could act, Jake grabbed her arm and shook his head. "Not yet," he whispered. "We need proof first." They waited until Kane dismissed his team, leaving him alone in the room. Then, Jake motioned for Sarah to follow him. They crept closer, staying low to avoid detection. Just as they reached the doorway, one of Kane's guards spotted them. "Intruders," he shouted, raising his weapon. The room erupted into chaos. Jake tackled the guard, disarming him quickly, while Sarah darted toward Kane. "You're not getting away with this," she yelled, holding up her recorder. But Kane smirked, unbothered by her threat. "You think exposing me will stop anything?" he sneered. "By the time your little message reaches anyone, the war will already have begun." Before Sarah could respond, more guards flooded into the room. Outnumbered and outgunned, Jake and Sarah fought valiantly. But it wasn't enough. They were subdued and dragged before Kane, who looked at them with cold amusement. "Brave, but foolish," he said. "Now you'll watch as I reshape the galaxy." But Sarah wasn't done yet. Using her wit, she began sowing discord among the guards, questioning their loyalty and pointing out flaws in Kane's plan. Her words created hesitation, giving Jake the opening he needed to break free. In the confusion, they managed to transmit the files they'd recovered directly to Earth's media outlets. Kane roared in fury as his secrets spilled into the open. With their mission complete, Jake and Sarah made a desperate run for the exit, dodging gunfire and explosions as Kane's forces closed in. Reaching the Iron Mule, they launched just as the base began to collapse under internal sabotage. Breathing heavily, Sarah stared out the viewport as the asteroid shrank behind them. "Do you think it's enough?" she asked. Jake shrugged. "Maybe. But one thing's for sure, Victor Kane isn't done yet." The transmission from Jake and Sarah's stolen files exploded across Earth's media networks like wildfire. News outlets scrambled to analyze the documents, piecing together the conspiracy that had been hidden in plain sight. The names of powerful figures, politicians, military leaders, and corporate elites were splashed across headlines, their roles in Victor Kane's release and his shadowy operations laid bare for the world to see. Public outrage followed swiftly. Protests erupted in cities across Earth and its colonies, with crowds chanting for justice and accountability. Some demanded immediate action against Kane and his allies, while others called for a renewed push toward peace. Amid the chaos, Admiral Patrick O'Connor found himself under intense scrutiny. His earlier admission to Sarah about releasing war criminals had not gone unnoticed, and now he faced pressure from all sides. In New Haven, Daniel Brooks watched the news unfold on a small monitor in the medical bay. Despite everything, the colony had managed to hold together, for now. But tensions remained high, especially after Daniel exposed Captain Lewis' betrayal. Lewis was under arrest, awaiting trial, but Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing something. Someone higher up was pulling strings, orchestrating events beyond their understanding. Meanwhile, Ambassador Rachel Kim worked tirelessly to salvage what little remained of diplomacy between humans and the Krill. Her efforts were met with resistance on both sides. Extremists within humanity saw her as weak, a traitor willing to bow to alien demands. Among the Krill, suspicions lingered that the attack on the medical corps was part of a larger human plot. Rachel knew time was running out. If trust wasn't restored soon, another war would become inevitable. Victor Kane, though forced to flee his collapsing asteroid base, wasn't idle. He regrouped with remnants of his forces and launched a daring raid on a major Krill settlement near the neutral zone. The strike was brutal and calculated, targeting civilian areas as well as military installations. When the dust settled, hundreds of Krill lay dead, and the settlement was left in ruins. Kane's message was clear: retaliation. By framing the attack as a response to the earlier assault on the medical court, he hoped to provoke the Krill into striking back at humanity. And it worked. Across Krill territories, calls for vengeance grew louder, drowning out voices of restraint. Diplomatic channels collapsed entirely, replaced by threats and ultimatums. On Earth, Sarah Bennett published an expose naming every individual implicated in Kane's conspiracy. Her article sent shockwaves through society, forcing even the most powerful elites to answer for their actions. Arrest warrants were issued, and emergency sessions of the United Earth Council convened to address the crisis. Yet, despite these efforts, the damage seemed irreversible. Fleets mobilized, weapons armed, and battle lines drawn. As the galaxy teetered on the brink of war, Daniel returned to his duties at the medical corps. Though physically healed, Dr. Elena Martinez remained haunted by her injuries, struggling to find purpose in a world spiraling toward destruction. She joined Daniel in treating survivors of Kane's latest attack, their shared mission becoming a fragile beacon of hope amid despair. Jake Thompson stayed on as part of Daniel's team, his skills proving invaluable in securing supplies and defending the colony. Together, they worked to rebuild trust between human and Krill medics, one patient at a time. It was slow, painstaking work, but it mattered. Even in the darkest moments, small acts of kindness reminded them why they fought for peace. Admiral O'Connor made a final plea for unity during a global broadcast. "We stand at a crossroads," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "The choices we make today will define us for generations to come. Let us choose wisely." But as stars continued to shine over the battered colonies, uncertainty loomed large. Would humanity rise above its flaws, or would fear and hatred consume them all? The answer remained unwritten, hanging precariously in the balance. The galaxy was on fire. Victor Kane's raid on the Krill settlement had ignited a fury that no one seemed able to contain. Across Krill territories, leaders demanded justice, their voices echoing with anger and grief. The attack had been savage, leaving behind scenes of devastation that shocked even seasoned warriors. For the Krill, it wasn't just an act of war, it was an insult, a deliberate attempt to humiliate them. On Earth, reactions were mixed. Some saw Kane's actions as proof that humanity needed to prepare for another conflict. Others argued that retaliating would only play into his hands, giving him exactly what he wanted, a reason to plunge both species into chaos. Admiral Patrick O'Connor found himself caught in the middle, torn between duty and morality. He knew Kane's plan all too well: provoke the Krill, blame them for escalating tensions, and use their response to justify a full-scale war. But stopping it felt impossible. Sarah Bennett worked around the clock, using her platform to expose every detail she could uncover about Kane's operation. Her articles reached millions, sparking debates and protests across human colonies. Yet for every person who called for peace, there was another shouting for revenge. Sarah began receiving threats, her office vandalized overnight. Still, she refused to back down. "If we stay silent," she told Daniel during a secure call, "then Kane wins." Daniel understood her determination all too well. Back on New Haven, He struggled to keep the medical corps operational as resources dwindled and distrust grew. Human medics whispered among themselves, questioning whether they should treat Krill patients at all. Meanwhile, the Krill medics bristled at the cold stares directed their way. It was as if the fragile bonds they'd built were unraveling before his eyes. Elena Martinez tried to bridge the gap, reminding everyone why they were there. "We're healers," she said firmly during a tense meeting. "Not soldiers. If we let hate divide us, then we've already lost." Her words resonated with some, but not enough to stop the growing divide. Then came the breaking point. A Krill patrol intercepted a human supply convoy near the neutral zone, claiming it carried weapons meant for Kane's forces. The humans denied it, insisting the cargo was medical supplies intended for New Haven. When shots were fired, both sides claimed self-defense. Within hours, skirmishes erupted along the border, each side accusing the other of aggression. Admiral O'Connor ordered reinforcements to the area, hoping to prevent further escalation. But even he couldn't ignore the mounting pressure from military hawks demanding action. "We can't sit here and do nothing," Captain Harold Lewis argued during a council meeting. "If we don't strike first, they will." O'Connor slammed his fist on the table. And what happens after that? More bloodshed. Another endless war. As the debate raged, Victor Kane watched from the shadows, savoring the chaos he had unleashed. His plan was working perfectly. Humanity and the Krill were turning against each other, just as he predicted. All that would take now was one final push, a single event catastrophic enough to erase any hope of reconciliation. That event came sooner than expected. A human colony on the edge of Krill space reported an attack, claiming Krill fighters had destroyed key infrastructure and killed civilians. Evidence quickly surfaced suggesting the attack was staged, planted by Kane's mercenaries to frame the Krill. But by the time the truth emerged, it was too late. Public outrage boiled over, and Earth's government authorized a retaliatory strike. Jake Thompson arrived at New Haven just as the order came through. He brought grim news. Fleets were mobilizing, and battle plans were already underway. "It's happening," he told Daniel. "They're going to hit Krill territory hard." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. Despite everything they'd done to expose the conspiracy, despite every effort to maintain peace, the galaxy was sliding toward war. Standing in the medical bay, surrounded by wounded soldiers from both sides, he realized how fragile hope truly was. "Maybe this is how it ends," Elena said softly, standing beside him. "Or maybe it's where we start fighting harder." Her words lingered in the air as alarms blared outside. The countdown to conflict had begun, and no one knew if peace would survive its arrival. Daniel Brooks knew they were running out of time. The fleets were mobilizing, weapons were being armed, and the galaxy was on the verge of another devastating war. He couldn't let it happen. Not like this. Not because of lies and manipulation. Desperation fueled his resolve. If diplomacy had failed, then maybe direct action could still make a difference. He gathered a small team of trusted individuals. Jake Thompson, whose skills as a pilot and fighter would be invaluable. Elena Martinez, who insisted on joining despite her lingering injuries, and Sarah Bennett, whose determination to expose the truth hadn't wavered. Together, they devised a plan to capture Victor Kane alive. If they could bring him in and force him to confess publicly, it might be enough to stop the war before it began. Kane's flagship, the Iron Fang Asterisk, was stationed near the edge of Krill territory, coordinating attacks against border colonies. Intelligence reports suggested he rarely left the vessel, making it both a target and a fortress. Breaking through its defenses wouldn't be easy, but Daniel was willing to risk everything for even the slightest chance at peace. The mission launched under cover of darkness. Jake piloted a stolen scout ship, its cloaking device masking their approach. As they neared the Iron Fang Asterisk, tension filled the cramped cockpit. "This is insane," Elena muttered, gripping her seat. "We're going to get ourselves killed." "Maybe," Daniel replied, his voice steady. "But if we don't try, Villians will die anyway. When they reached the flagship, Jake guided the ship into a blind spot created by one of the vessel's massive engines. From there, the team boarded using magnetic clamps and breaching pods. Once inside, they moved quickly, sticking to maintenance tunnels and avoiding patrols. The air was tense, every sound amplified in the narrow corridors. They finally located Kane in the command center, where he stood over a holodeck reviewing battle plans. His guards flanked him, weapons ready. Daniel signaled for the others to hold back while he stepped forward, raising his hands in surrender. "Victor Kane," he called out. "It's over." Kane turned slowly, a smirk spreading across his face. "Lieutenant Brooks," he said mockingly, "what an unexpected pleasure." Before Daniel could respond, Kane's guards opened fire. Chaos erupted as Jake and the others joined the fray. Bullets ricocheted off walls, and shouts filled the air. Alina stayed low, tending to a wound Jake sustained during the fight, while Sarah recorded everything on her datapad, ensuring the evidence wouldn't be lost. Outnumbered and outgunned, the team fought with desperation. When Kane tried to escape through a hidden passage, Daniel tackled him, pinning him to the ground. For a moment, the two men locked eyes, hatred blazing between them. "You think stopping me changes anything?" Kane spat. "War is inevitable." "No," Daniel growled, tightening his grip. "It's not." With Kane subdued, the team made a break for their ship, fighting through waves of mercenaries along the way. By the time they reached the docking bay, alarms blared throughout the Iron Fang *. Jake fired up the engines just as enemy ships closed in. As they fled into space, Sarah transmitted Kane's confession live across all channels. His words echoed through the stars, exposing his schemes to the entire galaxy. Back on Earth and among the Krill, reactions were mixed. Some called for immediate ceasefire, others demanded justice. But the truth had finally come to light. For Daniel and his team, survival felt hollow. They had done what they could, but the scars of betrayal and violence ran deep. Whether peace would follow remained uncertain, but for now, hope flickered faintly in the darkness. The galaxy held its breath. Victor Kane's confession spread like wildfire, forcing humanity and the Krill to confront the truth about the conspiracy that had nearly plunged them into war. For days, debates raged across colonies and settlements. Some called for immediate retaliation against those responsible, while others urged restraint, believing that further violence would only deepen the wounds. Admiral Patrick O'Connor appeared on a global broadcast, his face lined with exhaustion but resolute. "What has been done cannot be undone," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "But we can choose how to move forward. We can let fear and anger dictate our actions, or we can seek justice without sacrificing our humanity." Kane was brought to trial, along with the powerful figures implicated in his release. Their crimes were laid bare for all to see: betrayal, manipulation, and countless lives lost in pursuit of power. The verdict was swift: life imprisonment without parole. Yet, even as sentences were handed down, questions lingered. Who else had been complicit? How many more secrets remained hidden? On New Haven, Daniel Brooks watched the proceedings from the medical bay. The room buzzed with quiet conversations among medics, human and Krill alike. Trust was still fragile, but it was rebuilding, one conversation, one shared moment at a time. Elena Martinez worked tirelessly alongside him, her determination stronger than ever. "We're not just healing bodies," she reminded him one evening. "We're proving that peace is possible." Jake Thompson decided to stay on, lending his skills to protect the colony. His smuggling days were behind him now. He'd found something worth fighting for. Sarah Bennett continued her work as a journalist, ensuring no secrets stayed buried. Her exposes became a rallying cry for transparency and accountability, inspiring others to demand better from their leaders. Ambassador Rachel Kim spearheaded renewed diplomatic efforts between humans and the Krill. Progress was slow, marked by setbacks and moments of doubt, but small victories began to add up. A joint relief mission here, a cultural exchange program there. Each step, no matter how small, brought them closer to understanding. Yet, scars remained. Families mourned loved ones lost to Cain's schemes. Colonies struggled to rebuild after years of conflict. And distrust lingered, a shadow over every interaction. It would take generations to heal fully, if healing was even possible. But for the first time in years, hope felt tangible. Fragile, yes, but real. One night, Daniel stood outside the medical bay, staring up at the stars. The red dwarf star that illuminated New Haven cast a faint glow across the horizon. Behind him, voices carried softly through the open door. Laughter, arguments, whispers of life moving forward despite everything. Elena joined him, leaning against the railing. "Do you think we'll ever really get past this?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "Maybe not completely. But I think we owe it to everyone who suffered to keep trying." She nodded, her gaze fixed on the distant stars. "Then that's what we'll do." As the galaxy slowly turned toward an uncertain future, one truth became clear: peace wasn't a destination. It was a choice, made again and again, day after day. And though the road ahead promised challenges, those who believed in a better tomorrow vowed to walk it together. In the end, perhaps that was enough.